Welcome back, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Born on this date in 1958, actress Julie Golson of Birmingham. Golson's Hollywood career was brief. She has only one credit on IMDb, but she was nominated for New Star of the Year by the Golden Globes for her work in Where the Lilies Bloom. Today, we're going to have reporter John Sharp on the show to talk about freedom of information and how Alabama agencies continue to drag up the rear among states in getting information out that you and I have a right to see. First, we have evolving vape sales rules, a historic library's reopening, and a contraband airdrop into a prison. My name's Ike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama.
Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next-generation network to more people across the country at ComcastCorporation.com/investment in America.
An agreement between the state and plaintiffs in a lawsuit reached an agreement that will already tweak Alabama's new vape sale regulations, reports AL.com's Heather Gann. The law says that convenience stores are allowed to sell 34 specific tobacco and menthol-flavored e-cigarette products that have been approved by the FDA. Now, other flavors, including some that are being considered by the FDA, can be sold only in vape shops that admit only customers who are at least 21 years old. Now, supporters of the restrictions said they were intended to make the products less available to younger people. The Petroleum and Convenience Marketers of Alabama filed a lawsuit claiming the law is unconstitutional because the 21 and over retailers restriction is preempted by federal law. Now, the agreement reached allows the convenience stores and non-age restricted establishments to sell the 34 approved products plus those on the FDA's pending list and the state's Electronics Nicotine Delivery System ENDS directory. A library that was built in 1928 and closed during the pandemic has reopened, reports AL.com's Greg Garrison. The historic East Lake Library is in Birmingham, but not downtown, as most similar buildings are. It sits on Oporto Madrid Boulevard in East Lake. An effort was made to reopen the library in 2021, but the heating and air conditioning system needed to be replaced, and that replacement required a custom-built unit. The library is open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. The business of sneaking contraband into prisons has always been crafty. Yes, there have been actual cases of hacksaws, files, and ammunition snuck in through hollowed out bread or even baked into cakes. It's not just in the movies. There have been body cavity smuggling of items. We won't get any more graphic than that, but thanks, but you go ahead and keep that cell phone. I'm good. And now it's drone drop-offs. AL.com's Carol Robinson reports that a man and a woman from Huntsville have been arrested and accused of using a drone to drop off 2 backpacks full of drugs at Easterling Correctional Facility in Clio. They're now in the Barber County Jail. From the backpacks, authorities confiscated 686 grams of meth, 166 grams of synthetic cathinones, 150 grams of Suboxone, 38 grams of fentanyl, and 850 grams of marijuana, or 30 lids for those of you needing the metric to 1975 conversion. Let's take a quick ad break so we can pay the band. We'll be back with John Sharp to talk public information. Y'all stay with us.
PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Being a woman is a lot. Ollie supports you and yours with expert solutions for every age and life stage. They just launched 2 new products exclusively at Walmart. Period Hero combats bloat, mood swings, and more during PMS. And Balance Perimeno to support hormonal balance, mood, and metabolism during perimenopause. Grab yours at Ollie.com. Ollie! These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Today, we're going to welcome back to the Down in Alabama studios, John Sharp. He's a veteran reporter with AL.com who's covered many topics, including governments at the local and state levels. And John, we're sure glad to have you here.
Good to be here, Ike. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain yet this week. Well, you know, the people of Alabama, we'll jump right into this. They have legal rights to know what their public officials are up to. And because every citizen doesn't walk around with a stack of freedom of information requests, part of your job and our job is to get that information to the public while it still matters. Now, I wanted to have you on here so you can tell us how that's going in Alabama these days.
Well, you know, it's going frustratingly as same as it always has. I think reporters in the past probably could echo what I'm about ready to say, but yeah, it's not much of an improvement. There has been some slight tweaks to the state law, which are meant to make improvements, but I think there's a feeling amongst some that are interested in improving the availability and the transparency of our records in this state to do even better. And so, yeah, it's not a good situation right now, but I think there is some sincere interest to make some improvements, and we'll see where that goes. But what I mean by those improvements, a year ago, in the spring of 2024, the state legislature, for the first time in decades, approved a bill that set actual dates, codified dates into state law in which records are to be, or some sort of response from a government agency is to be had to people making a records request, and they set that at 15 days. Now, of course, the law made exceptions for extensions in those time periods, and in which some of a person I quoted in my story that's kind of an expert at open records laws. His name is David Coulier, indicated that actually potentially could be harmful more than a benefit to put that exception in there.
I know people who, because they can get an extension on their taxes, get an extension every year. And I guess it's the same kind of thing here, right?
Yeah, I guess so. The concern is that kind of the deadline that's set is 15 days. Well, some states have much stricter deadlines than that. But Alabama set theirs at 15. Before that, there was no deadline. The public body could take forever long until it acknowledged your records. Some studies have been done in recent years on open records accessibility and transparency. Indicate that it's for some agencies in Alabama, it can be hundreds of days before you hear back. The Mobile Police Department, for instance, was average wait time of 300 and some odd days.
Wow.
Birmingham Police Department's 200 and some odd days. I mean, you're talking about just ridiculously long time periods. And I start off my story kind of with a little bit of an anecdote of 2 experiences that I had recently, which I filed a open records request for a very simple request at the University of Alabama over who was leasing out Coleman Coliseum for President Donald Trump's event during graduation week. And then at the same time, I had filed a Freedom of Information request in the state of Florida, actually in Walton County, Florida, for an incident report that occurred in 2023 at the Vacation Beach House owned by U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville.
Hmm.
I got back that incident report in Walton County, Florida, without any issue in less than a few hours. I mean, I basically sent an email. Um, I had to make as a official request response back, and I got everything I needed back with some redactions, but everything I needed back for a story that I was working on real quick. I mean, it was turned within a day. I didn't hear back from the University of Alabama until well after the event occurred. And basically, all I got was a one sentence response saying, well, nobody leased out Coleman
Nah,
Coliseum for that
are
event.
you?
So, in other words, it was provided to the White House to utilize for what was a graduation like event. But
Mhm.
at any rate, that's what that those were the differences there. It took, and that's it in a nutshell. Even the simplest requests take weeks on end before you get a response back in Alabama. Other
Mhm.
states, it's like Florida, and I've read some stories where Florida's gotten worse actually in response times. But my
Yeah.
experience was very positive with trying to get some information back to the point where kind of opened my eyes. Like I've been dealing with making requests in Alabama for years, and to get something back from an adjacent state, um, records that typically would take quite some time to get back in Alabama, and it just made an
Hmm.
impression on me. I thought, wow, this is quick. What's the catch?
Yeah.
Because we're so used to it here, and so yeah, I dived into a little bit in this story just to see where Alabama ranked compared to other states, and there's rankings that are out there, and it's not good. Alabama's dead last when it comes to uh, what they call compliance rates for open records.
Yeah. You talk about Florida, and I've read some of those, actually commentaries from some news outlets and some freedom of information groups saying, hey, they're trying to skirt these sunshine laws that we have down here. I don't know much about what's going on. And, um, you know, it's a never ending battle anyway. But I think you hit the nail on the head in your story, calling what we have in Alabama a culture of secrecy, because culture is such a. I think that in Florida, in a place like that, you've had decades of, hey, the public. Here's a public request. We get the information out, and people just do it. And it's kind of that. Is that what you've seen over the years in Alabama? This culture of being, this is just how it is, and I'll do it when I do it, no matter whether there's a 15-day new law or what.
I think it's a regional issue. I think it's a southern issue. Some of the
Hmm.
states that were at the very bottom of the list were your Alabamas, Mississippi's, Louisiana's, Tennessee. It's definitely a cultural issue pertaining, and something has to do with the way, perhaps with Southern politics, just the avoidance of wanting to provide this information. It's just not a priority versus other states. So it has nothing to do really with partisan politics. I mean, if you look
Hmm.
at the rankings, number one state for compliance is Idaho, which struck
Okay.
me as interesting because Idaho is one of the most conservative states in the country. So this isn't just, Republicans are saying, no, we're not going to open up the records, or Democrats saying it the same thing. Um, Also ranked low on the list were states like Massachusetts. Kind of what goes into play here as well is whether or not, there is some partisan politics at play. Like the case with Idaho, my understanding is, even though it's a very conservative state, that a this whole process of better transparency was led by a particular politician. For instance, a former attorney general kind of pushed for the issue of better transparency forward.
Hmm.
But notably though, the states that are kind of at the top of the list generally are those that are a little bit more purple, where you have a little bit of or mix a state with a mix of a Republican and Democrat leaderships, folks that are elected, versus states that are overwhelmingly red or overwhelmingly blue, where you don't
Hmm.
have that. Um, how can I put it, pressure, I guess, from the other party to improve your government. And that's kind of what we've seen here. I mean, there really hasn't been that pressure until recently. I think there's been some pressure by within the Republican Party that, hey, we need to do better here because there are some lists that's been written about a lot now, and this doesn't look good from a government perspective that we're dead last on transparency. This isn't just about providing records to journalists. This is about providing records to the public. This is stuff that is of good public, good public governance is when you are able to access records, whether it's important information about water quality to you name it. I mean, it's vital for the health and welfare and safety of your state, and that's kind of what this issue goes into.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be a secret. For emphasis, I want to go back to those police numbers, or for a couple of police departments, their response statistics, according to, was it Muck Rock? Is that the name
Yeah,
of
Muck Rock. Yeah, they
yeah,
do a yeah they do an interesting report, and they really break it down too.
well, you had the average response time for Birmingham over 200 days. And even with that, and in Mobile, it was 312. But even with that, we're looking at success rates in both cases below 3%. I mean, once they come around to responding, you don't get anything. And that's mind blowing to me that can happen because after 312 days, your staff has changed. You've had turnover at the office. I mean, are people just, well, the next guy in my position will handle it, you know?
That's correct. That leads to that whole culture of secrecy. I mean, it's one agency begets another, and just
Mm,
kind of it's like a domino effect. And if you don't, if the Mobile Police Department's not responding, Birmingham's not, Huntsville, it goes on and on and on.
mm.
And why would you want to be the first one to stick your neck out there? That type of thing. And if there's no recourse, if there's nothing punitive, nothing to pressure agencies to do anything about this, there's nothing coming with much meat from the legislature on this issue, then it kind of continues on and on and on. But again, that there was again a bill that was approved. Senator Arthur Orr's kind of led the charge on this to try and make some improvements. He acknowledged to me that there's more improvements to be had, and they're looking at that potentially next year, next legislative session. They may dive into this issue. Would be interesting before an election year to dive into open records. I think perhaps that might be an interesting time to do so.
Yeah.
Kind of put this issue back out there in the public eye and talk about what is acceptable and what should not be acceptable in Alabama as far as 200 to 300-day wait periods for a police report.
Yeah, it always seems like it's difficult to get everybody fired up unless it reaches a crisis point like we're last in the nation because even though this matters so much, and you explained why that the people have a right to public information, but on a day-to-day basis, it's almost most folks are a step removed, right? I mean, because it is usually the press that are seeking freedom of information requests and that sort of thing. So it's really these stats that I guess might move people during an election year to put a little pressure on
Well,
politicians.
yeah, I agree. I think these things can be framed in different ways. Of course, this is not going to be the issue that leads any election year
Mhm.
discourse, but it could be framed in the context. I could see it being framed in the context of governments trying to hide something from you, or again, the secrecy. What are they up to really? Why are they not releasing this information? Why is Alabama like this? Who's in charge of providing your records? It can be used, I think. I think there's, a campaigner could use it in a creative way to try and push this issue out there a little bit more in a campaign season. But again, I don't know, if that will even be discussed on the campaign trail or not. I could see it, potentially being lumped in with other issues that could resonate.
Yeah.
But again, next spring, I anticipate open records laws being looked at again by the legislature. How far they go with it, I don't know. I do know, interestingly, I did get Senator Orr to indicate that he was in support of some sort of mandatory attorney fee shifting which is a phrase that refers to the government. The government would be a losing party in a public records lawsuit. And in that instance, they would have to pay, or they would be responsible for paying all the attorney's fees, legal fees. And if that was the case, that might be a little bit of a incentive, I guess you could say, to release the records.
Yeah, teeth in the law there.
Right. Don't send this thing to court because you could potentially have to pay. Now, I did talk to the Alabama Press Association about this, and they made a good point that, the Alabama Constitution provides for immunity, the state immunity from civil lawsuits. But, the Alabama State Supreme Court really has not weighed in on an Open Meetings Act violation type of lawsuit yet. So there could be some legal issues here at play as well, and perhaps some court cases in the future. I don't know. But, I mean, these are all things that are out there. Potentially could be explored, the tricky legal scenarios at play.
Yeah. Well, I know in Florida, back to Florida, they passed a constitutional amendment maybe 35 years ago that sort of clarified some of their Sunshine Law rules, and that's one thing we don't have here, and leaves it open to interpretation by the Supreme Court still.
Well, you bring up a good point, Ike. Florida was really the leader in all this movement years ago. I mean, Sunshine Law is named after the Sunshine State. So, I mean, they were the true leaders in this. However, I guess in the last 10 to 15 to 20 years, that effectiveness has kind of dwindled. And there's an overriding concern about open records accessibility, trying to get records and information especially from the federal government, that's become more problematic. And that, when you start talking about it in that context, you're talking about, where are we at as a democracy? I mean, these are public records. Why can we not access things that are for the public? And if you start, if the courts rule against the press in these type of situations, or against anyone really that prevents public records from being released, and we got another discussion for another day that's probably not as fun or interesting. Yeah. And well, it would be interesting. It would be a sad situation when you're talking about democratic institutions not having to worry about the word transparency.
Yeah. I'm glad you did the story. I know there'll be more down the pike. John, thanks for coming on and talking to us about it. It's something that's near and dear to all of our hearts and affects everybody, whether they take the time to realize it or not. So we appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
All right. Thanks, Ike.
Thanks, everybody out there, for listening to us. We're going to be back here again in the morning. Till then, come by and see us anytime you want to on the internet at al.com.